In a courtroom ruled by his arrogance, Detective Thorne saw nobody. He whispered a cruel joke about the plain woman at the stand. He never imagined she was the one person in the city he should have feared. The air in the Sterling Creek courthouse was thick enough to taste, heavy like the clouds before a summer storm. The low, persistent hum of the air conditioning system was the only sound that dared to fill the space, a monotonous drone against the backdrop of silent tension. High on his bench, Judge Elias Cole, a man whose patience was visibly wearing thin, tapped a restless rhythm on the polished wood. Down below, at the defendant's table, Detective Marcus Thorne lounged in his chair. He was a man poured into a finely tailored navy blue suit, the knot of his tie just a little too loose, a deliberate imperfection that broadcast his disdain for the proceedings. A gaudy gold watch gleamed on his wrist as he leaned toward his young, uniformed partner, Officer Riley. "Look what the public defender scraped off the bottom of the barrel," Thorne murmured, his voice a low sneer meant to be shared, but loud enough to ripple through the first few rows. A stifled chuckle came from Riley. The target of his joke, the woman on the witness stand, didn't flinch. Dr. Imani Hayes was the picture of invisibility. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, functional bun. A gray cardigan, the kind that looked like it had been through one too many wash cycles, hung over a plain white blouse. She wore no makeup, and a pair of simple, frameless glasses sat on her nose. She looked like a librarian, a social worker, someone you'd pass on the street and forget instantly. But her eyes, magnified slightly by the lenses, missed nothing. They swept the room with a calm, unnerving intensity. When her name was called, she had moved to the stand with a steady, unhurried pace that seemed to defy the courtroom's anxious energy. Now, she simply folded her hands in her lap and waited. The defense attorney, a young man looking flustered, cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes, could you please state for the court what you witnessed on the evening of August 12th, near the old industrial park?" Imani leaned into the microphone, her voice even and clear, devoid of emotion. "I was present as part of an ongoing surveillance operation. I observed Detective Thorne conduct what appeared to be an unsanctioned meeting, receive a package from two known felons, and then permit them to leave the scene without initiating an arrest or filing a report." The attorney scoffed, "A performance for the jury. Are you seriously claiming you just happened to see all this?" "From where?" "The moon." "No," Imani replied flatly. "From a concealed position approximately 75 feet away. And I have the entire exchange on high-definition video." Thorne's smirk finally faltered. It was just a twitch, a barely perceptible tightening at the corner of his mouth, but in the suffocating silence of the courtroom, it felt like a thunderclap. He shifted in his seat, his casual slouch gone. Judge Cole leaned forward, his interest piqued. "You said you were on a surveillance operation, Miss Hayes. What kind of operation?" The courtroom held its breath. Imani didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly, deliberately took off her glasses. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small microfiber cloth, beginning to polish the lenses with a methodical calm that drew every eye in the room. The small, repetitive motion was mesmerizing, a quiet ritual that amplified the tension to an unbearable degree. Thorne watched her, a knot of confusion and anger tightening in his gut. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, she set the cloth aside, put her glasses back on, and looked directly at him. Her gaze was no longer that of a timid witness. It was cold, sharp, and utterly dominant. "Special Agent Imani Hayes," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." She reached inside her blazer and produced a leather ID wallet, flipping it open. The unmistakable gold and blue seal of the FBI seemed to radiate its own light. The air in the room turned electric. The color drained from Marcus Thorne's face. He looked like a man who had been confidently striding forward, only to find the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Imani never took her eyes off him. "For the last 11 months, my team and I have been conducting a federal corruption investigation into the Sterling Creek Sheriff's Department. Operation Nightfall. An operation that was, until this exact moment, classified." She paused, letting the weight of her words crush the air from the room. before locking her gaze on the detective. "You, Detective Thorne, were my primary target." A wave of murmurs erupted, instantly silenced by the slam of the judge's gavel. Imani's voice dropped, becoming personal, intimate, and 1,000 times more terrifying. "Now, do you remember me, Detective? I was the woman whose car you illegally stopped and searched. The one you tried to intimidate in the coffee shop. I was standing 75 feet away when you took that bribe from Nico Vargas under the bridge. I've been watching you, your crew, and your entire pathetic little empire for almost a year." Thorne's lips parted, but no sound came out. The man who ruled his world with threats and swagger was utterly, devastatingly silent. To understand how a decorated detective, a king in his own kingdom, ended up in the crosshairs of a ghost, we have to go back 11 months earlier. The briefing room in the Chicago Federal Building was cold, sterile, and smelled of burnt coffee. Imani Hayes stood before a large whiteboard, her focus absolute. At the center of a complex web of lines, photos, and notes was the name, Detective Marcus Thorne. Deputy Director Eva Rostova, a woman with sharp Slavic features and an even sharper gaze, paced in front of the board. Her heels clicked on the linoleum floor, each sound a punctuation mark in her damning summary. "Marcus Thorne is not just a dirty cop," Rostova said, her voice low and laced with a faint Eastern European accent. "He's a cancer. He's running a protection racket that has this city by the throat." She tapped a photo of a smiling, handsome man. "This is Carlos Rivera, a mid-level drug trafficker. We had him dead to rights. An airtight case. The night before the trial, the key evidence, a ledger detailing every transaction, was accidentally destroyed in a precinct evidence locker flood. A flood caused by a single, conveniently broken pipe." She drew a red line from Thorne's picture to the Rivera case file. Thorne was the supervising officer on duty. Rivera walked. 2 weeks later, Thorne bought a boat. Rostova's eyes met Imani's. They were the color of a winter sky. "He's smart. He's insulated. His crew is loyal because they're either terrified or getting rich. We can't touch him from the outside. We've tried. He sees it coming a mile away." She stopped pacing and stood directly in front of Imani. "I'm not asking you to observe him, Imani. I'm asking you to become the ghost in his machine. He must never, ever see you coming." "You want me to live there?" Imani stated. It wasn't a question. "Exactly," Rostova confirmed. "No badge, no gun on your person, no official support that can be traced. We'll have a handler and a dead drop system, but on the ground, you're alone. We need him to look right through you, to see you as part of the scenery he so proudly despises." And so, Special Agent Imani Hayes vanished. In her place, Maya was born. Maya, a freelance graphic designer who had just moved to Sterling Creek for the cheap rent after a supposed bad breakup. She was quiet, kept to herself, and looked perpetually tired. She traded her sensible, professional wardrobe for worn-out jeans and faded t-shirts. She rented a small, second-floor apartment in a run-down complex called The Willows, a place that seemed to sag under the weight of its own neglect. She bought a beat-up blue hatchback with a dented rear bumper. For 11 months, Maya became a fixture of the background. She was the woman with the headphones at the corner laundromat, the quiet customer at the back of the line in the grocery store, the anonymous tenant who always paid her rent on time and never made a sound. And every night, in the quiet of her small apartment, behind a blacked-out window, she wasn't Maya. She was Imani, meticulously documenting the web of fear and corruption that Thorne had woven into the very fabric of the community. At the center of that web always was him. The Willows apartment complex was a place that had given up. The air hung heavy with the sweet, cloying smell from a nearby food processing plant, a scent that mixed with a faint, underlying note of decay. Graffiti on the brick walls was hastily painted over with mismatched colors, creating ugly, abstract patches, but new tags would always appear like a rash that could never be cured. This was Maya's world. Her life was a carefully constructed performance of insignificance. She shopped at the discount grocery store, letting people see the worn-out look in her eyes, ensuring her presence was utterly forgettable. She was the woman who kept her head down, who never made eye contact, who didn't open her door after dark. But behind that meticulously crafted facade, she watched. She listened. She recorded. She learned the neighborhood's nervous system. She knew the kid across the way was a runner for a low-level crew, but he wasn't the target. He was just a thread. And every thread, if you pulled it long enough, led back to the same name, Thorn. Even Mr. Henderson, a retired mailman who saw everything from his front porch, spoke of the rot. He didn't gossip. He observed, his commentary delivered in a low murmur as Maya passed by one evening. "This neighborhood is like a sick body, miss," he said, not looking at her, his eyes fixed on the street. "You can see the fever, the way people scurry around, the fear. But the infection, it's deep inside. And Thorn? He's the fever." Imani simply nodded, absorbing the community's weary resentment. It was the fuel for her mission. She didn't see Thorn up close until her 4th week. She was walking back from the store, carrying a cheap plastic bag of groceries, when his black, unmarked SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Detective Marcus Thorn stepped out. He wasn't wearing a uniform or a badge. The entitled menace in his posture was identification enough. The street seemed to empty in an instant. People ducked into shops or just turned and walked the other way. "Hey, you," he called out. Imani stopped, her heart rate a steady, controlled rhythm. She turned slowly. He strode up to her, his presence sucking the air out of the space around him. "Haven't seen you around before." "Moved in last month," she said, keeping her voice flat. "Unremarkable." He looked her up and down, a contemptuous sneer forming on his lips as he took in her worn jeans and faded hoodie. "You with someone?" "Just me." The sneer turned into a grin. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his leather jacket. Her training screamed at her, every nerve ending on high alert, but her face remained a blank mask of mild apprehension. On the shoulder strap of the backpack she always carried, a small, decorative metal rivet, which was actually a high-resolution pinhole camera, was recording everything. "Just so you know," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "it's a tough neighborhood. Good people need to know who to trust and who to fear. You see anything funny, you come to me, not the others. They don't handle things right." He tapped the cheap bag of groceries in her hand. "Gotta keep things clean, right?" He walked away without another word, getting back into his SUV and roaring off. The moment she was inside her apartment, the door locked and bolted. She didn't even take her coat off. She sat down, pulled a laptop from her backpack, and began uploading the encrypted file. Subject: initiated contact. No probable cause. Issued implicit threat and attempted intimidation. Video and audio attached. A few minutes later, a simple, coded reply appeared on her secure messaging app. Echo received. That was the first move on the chessboard. After that, he was a constant, lurking presence. The game had changed. Thorn's initial probe had yielded nothing, and that made him more suspicious, not less. The pressure escalated from a subtle presence to a campaign of low-grade psychological warfare. A patrol car, one he was known to use, would idle across the street from her apartment building for an hour at a time, often in the dead of night. Then, one morning, she woke up to find it parked directly in front of her building. At 3 a.m., its high beams flashed once, directly into her window before it drove away. It was a clear message: "I know where you sleep." A week later, she came out to find one of her car's tires had been expertly punctured. Not slashed, but a slow leak, just enough to make her late for a non-existent appointment. Just enough to be a significant, frustrating inconvenience. It was a malicious prank, a way of telling her he could touch her life whenever he wanted. She knew she couldn't slip, not even once. She needed something bigger, something undeniable that would force the department to act. She got on a rainy Tuesday night. Her target was Nico the Ghost Vargas, a dealer whose criminal record had been mysteriously wiped clean 2 months prior, despite him operating more freely than ever. Imani, dressed in black from head to toe, followed him to a desolate spot under a freeway overpass. The rain fell in sheets, turning the grimy concrete into a slick, reflective surface. From the deep shadows behind a support pillar, she recorded the whole exchange. Thorne arrived, laughing and smoking, seemingly impervious to the downpour. He took a thick, bulging envelope from Vargas. In return, he didn't hand over a case of contraband. He handed over a sealed, official police evidence bag containing a file. It was a direct payoff, a clear exchange of cash for sensitive information, undeniable and clear as day. The camera in her hand, disguised as a power bank, captured every detail. She submitted the footage at 2:15 a.m. The next morning, the real escalation began. Her nephew, Ben Carter, a rookie agent in a different city who she'd listed as her emergency contact, was her weak spot. Thorne, or rather his loyal, thuggish duo, Rook and Gallows, found him. They didn't corner him in a dark alley. They found him leaving his gym in broad daylight. They didn't lay a hand on him. Rook, a mountain of a man with a shaved head, simply blocked his path while Gallows, thin and wiry with dead eyes, snatched Ben's wallet. He calmly flipped through it, pulled out a photo of Ben and Imani, his Aunt Maya, at a family barbecue, and held it up. "Cute," Gallows rasped. He tore the photo clean in half, dropping the pieces on the wet pavement. "Tell your aunt her new hobby is getting expensive." They tossed the wallet at his feet and walked away. The threat was no longer a vague shadow. It was a razor blade held to her throat. They were closing in on her cover on her life. She filed a coded report. Compromise imminent. Subject is escalating to direct psychological intimidation targeting family. They know I'm watching. The reply from Rostova was blunt and immediate. "You're close. He's getting desperate. Do not abort. We are moving pieces into place." Bait the trap. The invisible line she had been walking was about to be erased. Thorne was done testing her from a distance. He was coming for her directly. Thorne was no longer testing her. He was hunting her. He made his move not with a show of force, but with a quiet, chilling confrontation. He ran into her at the small, dingy coffee shop she frequented. He sat down at her table without asking, a smug grin on his face. "You know, Maya," he said, stirring his black coffee with a plastic stick, "I'm a great judge of character. It's my gift. And you're hiding something. It's written all over your tired little face. You watch everything. You listen. But you never talk." Imani looked up from her book, her expression one of weary annoyance. "I'm a graphic designer. I observe things. It's part of the job." "Is it?" He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Because I think your job is me. And I think you're in way over your head." He stood up, tossing a few dollars on the table. "Be careful who you work for. Some people don't like being observed." That night, she met Rostova. The meeting point was the top floor of the city's old observatory, a place closed for renovations. Below them, the lights of Sterling Creek glittered like a fallen constellation. The contrast between the silent, watching stars above and the corrupt city below was stark. "He knows," Imani said, handing over a drive with the latest intel, including the audio from the coffee shop. "He's cornered a mouse, and now he's waiting for it to squeak. So we make him believe the mouse is ready to join his pack," Rostova replied, her eyes fixed on the city lights. "He's arrogant. He won't be able to resist the chance to turn an enemy, to prove he owns everyone." The bait was prepared. It was simple, direct, and played perfectly to his ego. 2 nights later, a text from a burner phone was sent to a number they knew Thorne monitored. It was from a fictional informant. "New player in town. Designer girl at the Willows. She's been asking questions. Smells like a fed." The trap was set. Now, they just had to wait for the predator to walk into it. It didn't take long. A text from an unknown number lit up Imani's phone. No greeting. Direct and demanding. "The Old Titan Granary. 11 p.m. Come alone. We need to talk about your future." Imani's reply was short. "Fine. Don't waste my time." She didn't wear one wire. She wore 4, woven into the seams of her jacket, with another camera lens hidden in a button. The Titan Granary was a skeletal ruin, a maze of rusted metal and deep shadows under a sliver of moon. The air was thick with the smell of decay and pigeon droppings. Thorne was waiting for her, leaning against a massive, silent piece of machinery, looking completely at ease. He was holding a heavy duffel bag. "Glad you could make it," he sneered. "I was beginning to think you were stupid." I'm not stupid, Imani said, her voice steady. Her glasses, another piece of tech, were streaming every detail to Rostova's team, hidden in unmarked vans a mile away. No, Thorne laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the cavernous space. You're just in over your head. See, I run this town, and anyone who wants to operate here either works for me, or they disappear. He tossed the duffel bag at her feet. It landed with a heavy thud. That's a down payment. You're going to be my new distributor on the east side. From now on, you answer to me. Imani knelt and unzipped the bag. Inside were bricks of narcotics and stacks of cash. And if I say no, Thorne's face hardened, the humor vanishing instantly. Then you won't be saying anything ever again. He pulled a gun from the back of his waistband, the metal gleaming in the dim light. This is how the game is played. Imani looked up at him, her face unreadable in the shadows. No, detective, she said, her voice suddenly devoid of any fear. This is how the game ends. On cue, the world erupted. Before Thorne could process her words, the cavernous granary was torn apart by light and sound. High-intensity floodlights blasted from the high catwalks, turning night into an unforgiving, sterile day. The roar of engines filled the air as a heavy-duty armored vehicle smashed through the main corrugated door, its headlights pinning Thorne like an animal. Simultaneously, black-clad figures rappelled down ropes from the ceiling, their movements silent and precise. Red and blue lights strobed across Thorne's stunned face. He froze, his mind unable to process the sudden, overwhelming chaos. He was a king whose castle walls had just turned to dust around him. Before he could even raise his weapon, a calm, authoritative voice, amplified and echoing through the granary, cut through the noise. Marcus Thorne, you're under arrest for racketeering, drug trafficking, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Deputy Director Rostova stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by armed agents. Thorne stared at her, then at Imani, who was now standing, her expression one of cold, professional finality. The smirk, the arrogance, the entire facade of power was gone, replaced by the dawning, soul-crushing horror of total and absolute defeat. The final scene wasn't in the granary. It was in a sterile, white interrogation room in the federal building. Thorne, stripped of his badge, his weapon, and his tailored suit, sat hunched in cheap, government-issue clothing. Across the metal table sat a calm, composed female prosecutor. Agent Rostova stood silently in the corner, a sentinel of justice. The prosecutor didn't slide a thick binder across the table. She slid a tablet. With a tap of her finger, the screen came to life, playing the crystal-clear video of Thorne's exchange with Nico Vargas under the bridge. The audio was perfect. Every incriminating word was captured. We have 2,000 hours of footage just like this, Marcus, the prosecutor said flatly. Audio recordings of you arranging bribes, video of you taking payoffs, sworn testimony from a dozen officers you thought were loyal to you. We have it all. She leaned forward. Your choice is simple. You can sign this full confession, name every dirty cop on your payroll, detail every crime, and resign in disgrace. You'll still do time, but you won't die in prison. Or you can take your chances with a jury that's going to see every single second of your career highlights. Thorne's face was pale, his hands trembling. He stared at the tablet, then at Rostova's unyielding face, then back at the confession on the table. With a broken, shuddering sigh, he picked up the pen. As he signed his life away, Imani Hayes watched from behind the one-way glass of the observation room. She didn't smile. She didn't feel a rush of victory. She just watched until the last signature was complete, then turned and walked away without a backward glance. Weeks later, she drove her own car, a low-key but powerful black sedan, through the streets of Sterling Creek. She passed the Willows. She saw Mr. Henderson on his porch, and this time, he wasn't just watching the street. He looked at her, and for the first time, he gave her a genuine, relaxed smile and a slow, deliberate nod. Further down the block, a group of kids, the same ones who used a scatter when a cruiser appeared, were playing a loud, joyful game of basketball. A voiceover, Imani's own thoughts, fills the silence. Justice isn't a single moment of victory. It's the quiet that follows the storm. It's the space created for life to grow back. The Sterling Creek investigation led to the indictment of 14 officers, including 2 high-ranking officials. What does true justice look like to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in shedding light on the truth, like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories. Please always comment with respect for everyone involved.